أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And welcome back to Living the Quran through the Living Quran, in which we have been exploring chapter number 56, Surah al-Waqiyah, the chapter of the great event, that eventual event of the day of resurrection. And up until this point, we've been reviewing some of the statements of God in this chapter in terms of the resurrection, in terms of the possibility and the inevitability, actually, of us being raised up on the day of resurrection. And that just as God brought us up on the first level of creation when He brought us into this world, that we will die and we will be raised up again, and that this is not difficult for God, that He can create us once again. Today, in our review of verses number 63 to 67, we want to reflect on the theme of, have you ever thought about it? Let us see what God has to say in terms of the resurrection and how He gives us practical examples in this world that you and I see on a daily basis. Before we go into the commentary of these 5 verses, let us have a listen to the Arabic, followed by the English translation, and then we'll come back with some thinking points to review and some takeaway messages that hopefully we can try and implement within our day-to-day life. God says the following in Surah al-Waqiyah.
أَفَرَأَيْتُم مَّا تَحْرُثُونَ أَأَنتُمْ تَزْرَعُونَهُ أَمْ نَحْنُ الزَّارِعُونَ لَوْ نَشَاءُ لَجَعَلْنَاهُ حُطَامًا فَظَلْتُمْ تَفَكَّهُونَ.
Have you ever given thought to that which you sow? Is it you that causes it to grow, or is it we who are the growers? If we so pleased, we could have reduced it to chaff before it is ripe and ready to be harvested, and then you would remain lamenting and talking bitterly.
إِنَّا لَمُغْرَمُونَ بَلْ نَحْنُ مَحْرُومُونَ.
And saying, surely we have been left indebted. Rather, we have been left with nothing. Indeed, we are finished. Now, before we can better understand this passage, let us review some of the words that God mentions in these few verses. The first word, hutama, means to break something and crush something. The word tafakkahun, it means to eat a fruit, while it also means to speak foolish things, being in a state of amazement and also showing great remorse. The word mughramun, it comes from the word gharamat, from the root word gharamat, and it means payment of damages and losses. Now, if we look a little bit, we see that the earth will transform the body of the human being into dirt. Once we have been buried and our body decomposes, it turns back into the earth. However, the seeds which we plant into the ground, they do not turn into dirt. Rather, the seeds which we plant deep into the earth have 2 opposite movements. The shoots grow and stretch up, while the roots dig deep into the ground. The roots absorb the nutrients, while the shoots break through any barriers, even if they are very rigid. And one seed transforms into many clusters of whatever it is going to produce, and it continues to reproduce. We have to appreciate that any type of transformation and change which nature goes through is the same for God to carry out. The life and death of creations, the sweet or salty water, all of these are one and the same in their creation for God. Now, one of the ways of knowing God is to assume the opposites. As the saying goes, تُعْرَفُ الْأَشْيَاء بِأَضْدَادِهَا, meaning that we can know things and their importance by knowing their antithesis, their polar opposites. So for example, if one of the two, either the night or the day, were longer than the other, or if the water of the earth were to sink into the ground, or if all of the plants on earth were to be thorny, or if our water were to become bitter, etc., then who is there that would be able to change that state that we find ourselves in? We have to take the opposite of all of these and realize that there is only one who can actually change that state. And yes, indeed, if that individual were to pay attention to this point, that whatever they have, that at any second that they run the risk of that blessing being changed or even being taken away from them, then they would need to sit and think, and they should sit and think of the consequences of their losses. Then they would be in a better position to consider the worth of the blessings that they currently have. And this would also draw them closer to the grace and the power of God. Let us conclude with a few takeaway messages from this portion for today. Takeaway message number 1 is that the same power which can, from one single seed, produce clusters of food, that same power can resurrect the human being from a single dead cell. Point number 2 to keep in mind is that the actions and their natural reactions are all carried out by the will of God. God is the true actor, and all actions are carried out by the will and the decree of the Almighty God. Point number 3, which we'll conclude with for today, is that there are some people who, until their actions take on a bitter outcome, do not have a wake-up of their conscience. Many people, it takes them some difficulty in life or some bitter outcome or some repercussion of their action to wake them up and to wake their conscience. And as God shows us in this passage that He has the ability, for example, for our crops that we spend so much time growing, He has the ability to not allow those to grow. And obviously, were that to happen, we would be left lamenting and concerned that we would have nothing to eat, nothing to sell, nothing to make our living with. And we have to realize that before those bitter outcomes come, that we wake up our conscience and realize the situation that we are in. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.